keep on feeling that that is not going to give us the results that we are looking for. So creating an environment wherein we are successful, especially early in our career, providing encouragement, empowerment, support, and even mentoring. Research suggests that the single most powerful prediction of human resilience is interpersonal support. Prepare people to weather the storm, help them in their own developing their own self-awareness, belief systems. Providing basic training of how to manage this personal stress is will actually help us on a long way to go. We also need to embrace uncertainty, use of quickest and most productive ways of experimenting, innovating, and implementing, making technology that core that is integrated with every aspect of organization as a mean to unlock value and enable quick reactions to the business and stakeholders need. This is not a time where we take years for innovation to hit the road. It has to be very, very, very quick innovation with a quick check and then rollouts. Creating flexible workforce deployment with combination of dedicated and dispersed employees. Network teams built around solutions, repetitive jobs digitized, and experts in the advisory roles. Creating a strong succession planning across the level is certainly going to help. And it is also need of the hour, keeping in view the risk that is now being associated with the senior leadership. The foremost need at a national level, I would say, is to use the technology for ground level understanding of people impacted for both life and livelihoods and get the data right. One of the reasons that most of the initiatives at the national level fail to really take off or impact at the level that we would really want them to is an absence of a real ground level understanding. We still don't, every time the data comes, it is from different sources. There is no matching, there is no one source of truth. So I think that will be first thing that we need to get right as a nation. The second thing that comes in mind is really very, very high investment in what is required the most. So we didn't find any kind of a decisive action that has been there to boost the healthcare or education services in last couple of years, which has been the need of the hour. So that is something that I think at a national level, we will have to create a kind of a push from the organizations, from the people around, so that the government has a decisive actions on investment in healthcare and education. I keep on saying education because I strongly believe that in last 2 years, while we have shifted the education digitally, we have lost millions of kids who have gone out of the education systems during this the last 2 years. We also need a policy level thinking that goes beyond the top 100 towns and take the care of the millions in the tier 3 and tier 4 cities and villages. Because currently, even if you look at we are talking about CBSE exams, that where the exams 12th results will be given on the basis of the class exams that have happened. What about the schools and schools where there have been no class exams? What are the kids going to do over there? So any thinking, any piece. Similarly, when we spoke about digital education, even the healthcare services, the vaccination, I have no idea how the millions of people will get covered, because at least there is no clear plan of how this coverage will be. Most of our plans are around the top 100 cities in India. What we need to see is going beyond the top 100 towns and taking care of the millions of three tier 3 4 cities and villages. So at this moment, that's all from my side, and look forward to hear from other panelists.
Thank you, Papia. I think great points which you mentioned, like mental health, upskilling, creating environment for interpersonal support, technological development. I think that's the need of the hour, which you very clearly mentioned. Very quick innovation and quick decisions, which, as you say, it's a VUCA world. We need to be very innovative and we need to take very quick decision, flexible workforce employment and policy level thinking. Great stuff, Papia. Thanks a lot for all the points. And as we go to the next level, I'm very pleased to introduce our next esteemed panelist, Mr. Manish Lalwani. Manish is the
Sakshi, 1 minute before you proceed, may I request all the panelists to please keep answering the questions which are there in the chat box. So a lot of questions are coming. So I would just request you to type the answers and continue. Thanks a lot, Sakshi.
Thank you. So Manish is the managing director at Marsh India. He has more than 20 years of professional experience in banking, life, general, and health insurance, and also in the financial service industry. Prior to Marsh, he was the senior vice president at Tata AIG Life Insurance. He's an alumnus of the famous Harvard Business School and MIT School in US. Manish, I will like to address the question to you, and it's not one, because I think insurance plays a very, very important role during this time. So I'll just like to address you maybe 3 questions in one question, but you will have 10 minutes to answer that. So healthcare is in normal times is imperative, and during a pandemic, it is absolutely indispensable. How did health insurance act as a rescuer during the second wave of pandemic? That is the first part. The second is India has one of the lowest health insurance penetrations in the world. And in times like these, how did organizations respond from an employee benefit perspective? And the third and the last part is being in the field of risk management and insurance, what do you think will be important for corporates going forward from a preparedness perspective? As we all know, and we think that the third wave will also hit. So that is small 3 questions in one question. So over to you, Manish.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Sakshi, and good afternoon, all listeners. It's great to be here on this panel with my fellow panelists. Thank you, Gaurav and India Healthcare Leadership Forum for having me on this panel. Uh, Addressing Sakshi's questions, I will, as she said, let me try and address these in 3 parts. First, let's just spend some few minutes on evolving people risk in the wake of the pandemic. Uh, I will then share a few best practices as to how did health insurance really rise up to the pandemic, adversities here in India, and then just a few comments on resilience and bouncing back, and how can organizations look towards the future, given what we've seen in the last couple of years. So as Marsh and McLennan, we work with clients across a broad spectrum of risk management and insurance issues. And we are in a sort of an advantageous position, I would say, because we get to see an outside-in view and as to how our organizations really addressing these challenges that are facing them in the wake of all these risks that are coming up, right? And so, yes, that does give us a bit of an advantageous position. And let me tell you, COVID-19 has really put people-related risks firmly in the boardroom agenda. First of all, it was always a risk, but it's now center stage in boardroom agenda. And employer-sponsored health, risk protection, and well-being plans are now considered central pillars of employee value proposition. You look at promoters, you look at CEOs across organizations, they have realized that employee well-being is central to business continuity, safety and employee performance, and not just these, but client and customer experience, reputation, and ultimately the business bottom line. So it all revolves around employee well-being and safety, and that double underlined during this pandemic. So at Mercer Marsh Benefits, we conducted a global research earlier this year around emerging people risk in the wake of the pandemic. It had more than 1,300 respondents across 9 regions of the world, 36 industries represented. It's a fairly good spread. Now, what were some of the key risks that came up? Top risks, I would say. Talent attraction, retention, engagement will continue to be a huge risk and an area to work on. You have increasing costs on health, risk protection, and well-being. And we are already seeing there is an increase in cost, and organizations have to look at how do we really optimize and leverage the best. Then you have increasing technology and cyber risk that is also going to impact human capital, social media and things like that, and there are related risks. You have deteriorating mental health. That's come up as a big risk going forward. And then this one is new, workforce exhaustion, right? So you have fatigue, and we've seen enough of employees getting fatigued out, being on Zoom calls and being on, virtual engagements across, no time foundations, they're working long hours in spite of working from home. So workforce exhaustion is going to be a key risk going forward. Now, given this backdrop, let's talk about how did really health insurance rise up to the occasion, right? And I'm sure all of you know, in India, insurance penetration continues to still be abysmally low. Health insurance, particularly, close to just 3% penetration. Okay. In urban areas as well, we believe only 81% of people, they don't have insurance. So only 19 actually have insurance, 19%. And in urban areas, that's 86%, and rural areas, it's actually 81%, right? So abysmally low level of penetration still. Now, having said that, the health insurance segment really rose up to the occasion in the recent pandemic, I would say. So all insurance plans, the health insurance plans responded to hospitalization claims. First of all, that's very important. So in India, pandemic is not an exclusion in your health insurance policy, whether it's a group policy or an individual policy, right? The regulator played a very active role. So the regulator came up with guidelines and it advised insurers to come up with standard, COVID care plans. So you had Corona or COVID Rakshak plans and a COVID, coverage plans that were got introduced. Okay, there were a lot of enhanced benefits that got introduced by insurers. So you had pandemic buffers, you had non-medical expenditure, you had PPE kits getting covered, you had oxygen concentrators being covered. Of course, you have to buy those covers and you have to select those, but those were made available to people. Home care got covered and things like that. Insurers were asked by the regulator to settle claims on scanned document basis. Okay, so that was again a quick response to what was required. And then you had host of voluntary plans, top-up programs, etc., etc. Now, one area that got significantly impacted is the group term life insurance, right? One is health insurance, but then you have term life insurance. And you'll be surprised to know term life claims went almost 10 times up in the last 2 months. It's a sad statement that I'm making. Organizations who had 2 to 3 deaths in the entire year last year had almost 20 to 25 deaths in just 2 months. That's really sad. Okay, so term life insurance has really, shot up. The rates have shot up. The capacity is dried up. That's an area that we need to look at, and that's an area that organizations to look at as they come up for renewing those contracts going forward. Now, as well as Papia mentioned earlier, the velocity of this wave 2 was very, very steep, right? In wave 1, we saw people staying indoors, not going out for hospitalization. There was lockdown, right? So claims actually came down. But in wave 2, just in April and May, we see almost 17 to 22% of claims being COVID-related claims across organizations. So that's a significant, contribution. And that's I see that to be a good side of health insurance as well, right? Like 1 out of 4 claims is a COVID claim, and insurers are paying all those claims, right? So that's a good sign as to how the sector has really come out. We've seen organizations, do a lot. They've been resilient. They've bounced back. They brought in employee care programs, and across employee benefits, 9 out of 10 organizations have actually introduced something new, in terms of employee benefits. And we bucket them into 3: financial support, you have leave support, and then you have employee connect. So in financial support, we've seen organizations set up benevolent funds, salary advances, child education support if a member of the organization has demised. We saw pandemic buffers. We've seen global headquarters actually send funds to India, head offices to tide over the situation, and even send medical equipment. So that talks a lot, right, on the financial support side. On the leave side, we've seen organizations extend uncounted leaves, extended leaves for caregivers, and vaccine days off, bereavement leave, and things like that. And then finally, on the Employee Connect, organizations have extended EAP programs, digital health programs, COVID task force, helplines, so on and so forth. So across the spectrum, we saw employers really rise up, and we saw a lot of collaboration between, administration, risk management, HR, finance. Everybody got together to really help the employees. So finally, I mean, one thing is clear, organizations must be resilient as we look into the future, and resilience, to my mind, is not just business continuity planning. It's not just the capacity to absorb negative events. It is how do you really quickly respond, and then how do you really capitalize on these threats and capitalize on opportunities. We saw a number of companies, mid-segment, large companies, companies which responded well and were able to convert into opportunities and help more client with goodwill, more customer goodwill, and as well, serve their shareholders as such, right? So risk going forward is going to be even more complex. It is no more going to be a single vector event. What started as a healthcare issue became an economic issue, involuntary migration, credit issues, food shortage, lockdown. So, we have to really have a comprehensive view to forecast risk events and then have strong plans based on data, based on organizational agility, and most importantly, collaboration within the organization. So, I'll kind of give a pause here. I just like to underline with the closing comment that if you look at S&P 500, valuations, I mean 500 S&P 500 companies, 90% of that value now comes out of intellectual, intangible assets. Way back in 1975, it was just 17%. Intangible assets contributed to just 17%. But now it's about data, intellectual property, brand, reputation, and most importantly, customer relationships. So relationships matter. And that's what, resilient organizations have to protect and really capitalize on. So at this stage, I'll just give it a pause. Thanks, Sakshi. Back to you.
Thank you, Manish. I think you very rightly said that the organizations need to be very resilient, and collaboration is the only solution. Nobody can work individually or just in silos. Everything needs to be collaborated and put right. Thank you so much for your viewpoints. And now moving to the next panelist, I am delighted to introduce you to Mr. Manoj Garg. Manoj is the CHRO and Head of International Business at Dr. Lal Path Labs. He has over 25 years of experience in HR strategies and operations for organizations across geographies. He has worked for organizations like Bharti Airtel, Dell, ST Microelectronics, and Asian Paints. He is an alumnus of Accelerite, Jamshedpur, and NIT Kozhikode. Manoj, I will like to address this question as you are one of the COVID warriors. So since the beginning of the pandemic, the workforce at Dr. Lal Path Labs has been on the fields testing, collecting, and providing samples, putting their lives on risk. What were some of the challenges faced by the operations teams during the second wave of pandemic? And what are some of the best practices? What learnings you carry, which you would like to share with the participants to ensure the physical and emotional well-being of employees to strive and thrive through this pandemic? So over to you, Manoj. Manoj, you are on mute.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, before talking about the wave two, I just wanted to talk through a little bit about wave one as well, because for us as a testing organization, this has been a continuum for the last 15 months. This is more like a new normal. What happened, in the first wave? I think the lockdown was very sudden. None of us were prepared. I can very safely say that in my lifetime, I haven't seen a scenario like this before, where on the roads there is absolutely no vehicle, pin drop silence across, and so on and so forth. So it was sudden, and all the policies, the local administration, everyone was coming out with some or the other restriction or opening. And I still remember on the WhatsApp messages, we were getting every state, every district administration's notices. So the biggest challenge at that point in time for us was uh, to how do you really keep your business running? How do you keep your outlets open? How do you really ship samples? How do you collect samples? Uh, Virus was completely new. Uh, all our employees, including myself, we were really scared. Nobody knew, what would be the real impact. So, it all started off with a lot of chaos, both logistics, running the operation, keeping the organization, let's say, uh, open for business. Then once we got out of that in a couple of days, we started to look at as to what are the challenges in front of us from a business continuity perspective. First and foremost, we needed to train close to 1,000 people for collecting these samples. How do you train people when everything is locked down? So we used digital training medium. Uh, Most of the time, medical training is show and tell in person. Now these are all very, let's say, intensive procedures. So, but we had to do that. So we did training online through mobile videos. We had to bring all the samples to Delhi because our testing facility that time was in Delhi, and government was giving certifications for each lab. How do you really, have a logistics during the lockdown when no flights are running, or very few flights are running? There are no trains, no buses, nothing. How do you really ship samples across the country? And obviously, the various customers across the country. So we are present in all states and almost 250 cities. They were expecting us to provide the testing services. So logistics challenges were there. Navigating the state-specific regulations, disruptions to operations are happening. Police did not know whom to stop, which is essential service, what is not essential service, is diagnostics an essential service or not. In fact, people were stranded without ID cards, let's put it this way. And so getting all that curfew passes was a big challenge. Protecting and motivating staff to collect samples was a big effort in the first 3 months. How do you really convince people that the N95 mask, the PPE kit, which is being provided, is going to protect them, is going to protect their families? I have witnessed those scenarios where employees were asking us, saying, we don't want to go back home because we might carry this virus to our families. So can you put us up in hotels? There were no hotels which were open. So it was a very, very different kind of a challenge in the phase one or wave one, what you can call it. So we had infections in the team that time, but predominantly they were all in the front line. Couple of people got infected, but they recovered quickly. Luckily, we did not have any fatalities at that time as well. So we were able to manage our operations with fewer days of localized disruptions here and there. Things went like this till October, November, and suddenly the numbers started to come down. From November to February, it looked as if there was no COVID. Samples, testing volumes came down, and pretty much we started to do the next year's budgeting and planning, and we did not know how to anticipate or what to anticipate for the next year in terms of specific COVID infections. And then came the second wave, which is what we all are aware of. Now, this time around, what took us by surprise was the intensity of the wave. I guess earlier panelists also spoke about how exactly the number of infections went up, how much hospitalizations went up. But as an organization, we were probably better prepared. And let me speak about few positives of the period between, let's say, March and June, which we'll probably call a second wave. I think our frontline employees were not scared any further. We did not have to fight the fear battle. In fact, pretty much everybody had seen this happening over a period of so many months. People had immense confidence that company is doing enough to protect and take care of their well-being. And I'll talk a little bit about what we did. The other positive was that a large part of our workforce was already fully vaccinated. Thanks to the vaccination prioritization program by Government of India, in the month of January, all frontline healthcare workers were given vaccination opportunity. And that again had a very positive impact on the morale of our employees. By this time, we moved from just one testing location to more than 13 testing locations. How this is important? From a logistics standpoint, we didn't have to really ship samples from all across the country to one location in Delhi, but we were able to test the COVID samples from 13 locations in various major states. We also had our staff now covered under health insurance, term insurance, etc. So there was an adequate psychological safety in the minds of our workforce. Now that's the positive side of the equation. But on the business side, what we noticed was that the demand for testing shot up to very high levels. The other piece was that there was very high concentration of cases initially in one or two states, but then it spread very, very rapidly across the various parts of the country. While the ratio of infection to hospitalization may have remained the same between, and I don't have those statistics, but I'm saying that maybe it is the same between the wave 1 and wave 2, but the sheer number of infections which happened in wave 2 led to far more hospitalizations. Now, with hospitalization came many other tests which were being recommended by the clinicians, which we call them as allied COVID tests. So while the organization was very well prepared to do RT-PCR testing in many locations, we did not anticipate as much demand for the COVID allied test. And I'm sure you all must have heard of these names like D-dimer, IL-6, and so on and so forth. So there was, again, a lot of demand for such tests. A lot of people were asking for home collection. Unlike phase 1, where we did not have too much of stress on home collection, this time around in phase 2, we saw that we ran out of capacity to really service every demand. Our call centers were experiencing almost 4 times the call volume, 5 times the call volumes. Same was for home collection. So in this phase 2, when in phase 1, while we were struggling to keep our outlets open, manage logistics, in phase 2, our challenge was how do we really quickly augment capacity? And we hired almost 250 people in less than 3 weeks just to augment that capacity so that we are able to service our patients. In wave 2, we also noticed that on the staff side, we started to see some infections, not only on the front line, but also in the middle layer, as well as people who are doing coordination jobs. The other characteristics which I think we spoke earlier about was that this time in wave 2, a lot of families also got impacted. A lot of people lost their loved ones. Obviously, that also had an emotional toll on our employees. And all this, let's say, created a kind of a challenge for us to service the demand which was coming in. We hired almost 250 people, but I could very easily say that despite that, we had a challenging 6 weeks where we were trying to manage the operations on one side with people working more than 14 to 16 hours, and on the other side, patients continuously anxious and requesting reports on time. So that's the wave 2 for us, and it is probably still continuing a little bit here and there. But how did we really cope as an organization? What did we do in last 15 months to run a healthcare service delivery organization? I would say the efforts could be classified in 5 buckets. First one is health and safety. Second one is rewards and recognition. Third is work practices. Fourth is financial safety stroke security. And last but most important is the connection, communication, and emotional well-being. Let me quickly elaborate each one of them. First and foremost was health and safety. We are a testing organization, so we were, we could make COVID testing free for all. All our staff, all the allied tests were free for all. We had assisted pickup, home collection pickup for our staff. We prioritize them because if they are not well, then they cannot serve the customers well. So we took that view. We created a COVID task force dedicated to help employees, which I think most of the organizations did. Oxygen concentrators, support to employee families, all that we did. We also initiated a free doctor consultation because at that time, getting right advice was becoming very challenging. Paid leaves for infection. In fact, even till date, we actually are not asking and not tracking anybody who says he's COVID positive. No questions asked, and a person can stay at home. When they feel comfortable, they come back. So we really created an environment where people could feel comforted. Health and safety was taken care of. All our locations being medical locations, obviously the sanitization protocol and all the safety gears was always provided. It is not something which we did for COVID. It is done throughout. It's part of our business. On the rewards and recognition, we instituted right upfront in the wave 1 itself ways and means of rewarding people. We had a very successful campaign of LPL heroes running on various social media channels. Facebook, we have a closed Facebook group, emails. We published stories of people going out of the way to service the customers. And what at least one learning I've got is that actually people in healthcare take pride in serving customers, and there is no better reward for them when they're able to execute something like this. And our whole organization really rose to the occasion at that time. We had regular connect calls with leadership team. We had e-certificate distribution, incentive programs, and whole host of things which were done to ensure that people are motivated and they feel recognized and rewarded. On the workforce practices, I think we also implemented for roles which were not customer-facing roles, work from home, flexible working benefits, employee returning back to work. All safety protocols were informed to them. They were trained on it, and they could come back to work based on the requirements of theirs.
We need to wind up.
Yes. And I would then probably talk about the connect and support. So we ensured that right from the chairman to MD to CEO, everybody was having very, very regular calls with frontline employees, with the middle management. We had employee loan schemes, assistance programs. Again, for well-being, mental health, wellness, we had taken a partnership with one of the leading wellness organizations. They conducted seminars, and we ensured that people have help around when they needed it. And I think these are probably some of the things which helped us keep the motivation, morale, and enthusiasm of our organization up. and we are continuing to support all our customers to best of our capabilities. So these are few things which we did as an organization.
Thanks a lot, Manoj. And I think I have personally used the services, and many of the participants and panelists also must have used the services. I think Dr. Lal Pathlab have done an extraordinary job, because the first wave as well as the second wave, there was a lot of requirement. The testing capacity had to be enhanced significantly. And I think you lived up to that expectation. So really, you people have been on the front line and helped in saving a lot of lives. So thanks from all the panelists and participants. Over to you, Sakshi.
Thank you, Mr. Manoj, for the points which you emphasized. I think very important is empathy towards people, towards employees, which actually turns into rewards and recognition for customers also. Thanks a lot for the valuable insights. Next, I am pleased to introduce our next esteemed panelist, Mr. Raghavendra Shenoy. Raghavendra, well known as Raghu, has held positions of Managing Director for Johnson & Johnson Medical India. He is a healthcare leader who has over 3 decades of experience in healthcare and FMCG, having worked in India as well as neighboring countries. Raghu has honed his skills in areas of business development, multi-level stakeholder management, business modeling, and cross-functional leadership. He is an alumnus of IMD Lausanne and NMIS Mumbai. So Raghu, I would like to ask you this question. As we unlock, not all decisions taken were in the first phase. We saw that not all decisions which were taken were very well accepted by the employees. What, according to you, are the right policies, protocols, and procedures that could have been followed during the second wave? And the next part to it is, how do we ensure that we bounce back quickly and boost the morale, agility, and flexibility of the employees as well as the organizations? So over to you, Raghu.
Yeah, thank you, Sakshi. First and foremost, a big thank you to the India Healthcare Leadership Forum, Gaurav and Sakshi. Thank you very much for restarting this webinar series after a break. So you guys are back after a short break, I must say. Thank you for that. And also to all the people behind the scenes working so diligently to get this event together. It's not easy, I know that. So big thank you to your support team as well. And a big thank you to the esteemed panelists and participants from all over who have taken the time out to join this session on a Saturday evening when you could have easily spent the time with your family. But you have taken the pains to join us. So thank you so much for that as well. In the stipulated 8 minutes, it's going to be extremely difficult to cover every aspect of what Sakshi just asked me because as the previous panelists also spoke, it's a vast subject on its own. But I'll try and do justice to all the 3 questions. I'll split it into 3 parts. The first part you asked me was, why were employees unhappy or unwilling with the initial lockdown, and what went wrong with that decision making? That's the first part. I think as happens in every adversity or any kind of a natural disaster or calamity, one thing that stands out is the leadership priority. And in this case, in the case of this unprecedented pandemic, the priority from leadership was to strike a fine balance between the 2 P's that they are to choose from. The first P is obviously from the P&L, the P from the P&L, and the second is from the P from the people. So striking this balance is easier said than done. You're responsible for delivering numbers and revenues for the organization as well. At the same time, you're responsible for the well-being of your people. So striking that balance needs a lot of empathy. So that's the E. So everywhere we look around, we are on the E journey. Everything is E today. But the biggest E leaders should keep in mind is empathy. And I think somewhere, some organizations that I've been talking to, this E was sadly missing. And I think that is what was creating this whole fear, the aura of fear, uncertainty within the minds of the employees. And they were unwilling to come back to the workplace. Yesterday, I just read a survey in the US, about 1,000 adults were surveyed, of which almost 39% said that they are willing to quit the organization if they don't get permission to work from home. I mean, it's come to that level. Out of that, 42% were millennials who want to still continue working from home because they're not prepared mentally or whatever. I think empathy builds in a lot of trust, and trust brings in stability. So empathizing with the employees and understanding what are the different fears that they are facing in their minds. It's not easy. I mean, there are people in my complex who have not stepped out of their homes for the last 1.5 years. We have such kind of people. So think of what the employees have undergone in these 1.5 years. And that is where that empathy piece plays a big role. Because if people are not convinced that coming back to the workplace is going to be safe, obviously they'll decide against. I think that is one of the biggest challenges that organizations have faced. In the midst of it, we've also seen a number of organizations, because of whatever compulsions, have had layoffs. Now that is like a double whammy. Within the pandemic, getting laid off and losing your job, especially when people, they are sole earning members or only the breadwinners of the family. Imagine that kind of a situation. So doing something like this in the pandemic, it's not only about the people who got impacted, but it sent tremors across the whole organization. Because everybody asked the question to himself or herself, am I going to be the next? So I think that was another big disaster, and which kept people away, and it really worked on their psyche as to whether this is going to continue, what are we going to be? Even the commute to the workplace, is it safe enough for us to go to the workplace? Are the protocols in place in the workplace? What kind of a future do we have? Is that secured by the organization? I think these were all the issues that were all the employees were facing, and it was working on their minds. So I think those are some of the decisions which went against, and people were really unwilling to take that plunge between the first and the second wave. Now, coming to your second part of the question around protocols, policies, and procedures, I think the previous panelists have spoken a lot. I'll just give my take on these, because I had the good opportunity to work closely with an Indian pharma company, 5,000 employees, 6 locations, including the corporate office, 3 manufacturing plants, R&D, and so the thing that stood out from this whole episode after the first wave and before the second wave, I think again it come back to leadership. So the leaders in this organization chose the P of the people. Okay, and they said that we will not leave any stone unturned, we will not cut any corners, and we will do everything to ensure the safety, well-being, security, future of our employees. I think that was the most important decision taken by the leadership. All of us have read about what Israel has done. I think I always quote this example of Israel. Small country, 9.2 million people, Prime Minister Netanyahu, very early on in the pandemic, booked 25 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine at a premium. I mean, who does that? 9 million, 25 million, accounting for all wastage, everything. The point that he made was every human life is precious and needs to be saved. That's it. His only concern. Why did he stock so much? Because he knew. Why did he pay a premium? He knew that once the vaccines are out in the market, there'll be a mad scramble and people may not get it. So why not pre-book and ensure that every Israeli citizen is saved? I mean, look at the thought. So I think this is what leadership defines. This is what leadership showcases. And when I say empathy and trust and stability and all this comes in, now is the time for the sensitive side, the caring side of leadership to be demonstrated. Very simple. So this organization, I would say, I'll quickly touch upon some of the points that they did around the protocol, policy, procedure part, and then I'll move on to the next part about bouncing back. So here, what they did was very simple. The core leadership team took complete accountability for the whole organization. All the people within their departments, they took accountability, and this was the central task force in the corporate office. They pulled up. They constituted their own task force within corporate services, admin, IT, finance, HR, all of them. And then every department had to look at getting these protocols in place, working around only 3 things. A safe commute for people who are going to be traveling from their homes to the office, wherever the office is. A safe workplace, because that's where they're going to be spending 8 to 9 hours. And the third, a safe and secure future. That's it. So now when you think about these three things and you know that you're not going to be cutting any corners because it's going to need a lot of resources to put all these protocols in, things automatically started falling in place. IT department came up with a very nice app, which every employee had to go onto the app every morning and report his or his own and his family members' health status. There were like zones, questions around their health, and there were grading like yellow, orange, red, and green. The yellow ones would be tackled differently, and so on and so forth. So that app was a must before they entered the premises. They had to do it at home. The commute was very simple. That was the simplest, I think, because buses were arranged from every location to the workplace. That was the simplest part, and buses sanitized regularly and all that. So the transport department managed that part very well. Security played a big role because of the screening of the employees at the gate of all the premises. And then the cafeteria and, then the staggered timings and staggered work hours, staggered timings in the cafeteria, and all these protocols quickly fell into place. They went to the extent of looking at what would happen if any of their employees actually came down with the infection. So tie-ups with the hospitals in the neighborhood, that was one big decision, because employees' concern was more around their own safety and health. So that was taken care. So next was when the vaccines became available, a huge vaccination drive across board to get all the employees vaccinated. That also helped and allayed all the fears in the minds of the employees. The same was extended to their family members as well. So I think when you take care of all these aspects, there's a lot of trust that comes in, and people start trusting their leaders, the organization, and really all these protocols and procedures and policies that even around insurance, as Mr. Lalwani mentioned, a lot of companies went out of the way to get the insurance cover extended, all that. So that also was taken care. In the event of death of an employee, those things were also taken care. I think a lot of organizations have already done that. Education for the children till they are 18, and then jobs for the spouses and stuff like that. So all this was implemented. So I had the opportunity to watch all this and contribute to all these protocols in a very, 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 very fine manner to ensure that nothing is unanswered. I think these really helped the organization. On the revenue side, they were the lucky ones because the pharma company, they were into specialty. So the revenue top line was not so impacted. So they could really, figure all this out. But I'm sure where there are challenges, I think organizations which did not get revenue going in these 1.5 years will have the bigger challenge, where I can talk a little bit more later on maybe. But this is the time for disruption beyond innovation. You need to go back to your drawing boards and understand how now you can disrupt using e-commerce, using all your strengths, wherever your strengths are lying. How can you lease out your services and things like that to get some revenue going? This is the age of collaboration. I mean, look at all the collaborations around us. So it is, whether it's the AstraZeneca Oxford collaboration, whether it's the Sanofi GSK collaboration, everybody is coming together to fight this pandemic. So collaboration is the way to go, and you can always look at revenue streams coming from such kind of collaboration, where smaller companies may not have the wherewithal in sales, marketing, supply chain, where you could actually lease or rent out your services. So these are things that you could really look at. So these were the things around policy procedure. Now, coming to the last part of what Sakshi asked me around bouncing back. Now, this is going to be, there are no right or wrong answer, because bouncing back is possible only if your employees are in the right frame of mind. And whatever you have done up till this stage, if they have that right frame of mind where all their safety and security issues have been resolved, it's very easy to bounce back. Where organizations have failed is the point where they did not engage with their employees even during the work from home, remote working period. That is where a lot of employees felt left out. Initially, it was quite okay when there was a national lockdown. People were talking regularly and all that was happening. But I think now it is even more imperative. By the way, in the protocol thing, there was a 24/7 help desk with a doctor, psychologist, counselor, all 24/7 they were available. That plays a big role in bouncing back. Upskilling, a lot of people mentioned, the other panelists mentioned about upskilling, and so the organization made changes around their policies where people could take courses on Coursera or Udemy or these kind of platforms and build new skills on the digital side, and get more and more upskilled. So that was another thing. So bouncing back will be a culmination of all these efforts to make people really understand what is it that they will be doing in the future, making their life easy, focusing on the mental agility part, focusing on the flexibility around the workplace, around everything. I think leaders also need to understand that some of the employees will be grieving as well, having lost a loved one. So the mental thing, the mental health and well-being also is going to play a big role. So bouncing back will depend on all these factors put together when organizations will then start going back to kind of near normal as in the pre-COVID area. So I think these are some of the points that I thought I will touch upon.
Thanks a lot, Raghu. I think excellent insights. So on the lighter side, we don't talk about vaccines and Indian vaccines and foreign vaccines because we don't want our Twitter handle to be banned. Neither we want FIRs to be filed against us. So over to you, Sakshi.
Yeah. Thank you, Raghu. I think great insights. As you very rightly said, empathy is the key point. E for empathy, E for employee. And this will all help in bouncing back. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So going to our next level. So I'm very pleased to introduce our next esteemed panelist, Dr. Ankita Singh. Dr. Ankita is the Senior Vice President and Global Head of HR at Signex Datamatics. She has over 22 years of progressive experience in managing and leading various aspects of human resources, spanning across high-paced business domains of the ITES. She was awarded as the CHRO of the year continuously for 4 years from 2017 to 20, and she has achieved many more awards and recognition. So Dr. Ankita, you have such great experience in HR. So I would like to ask you some questions around mental health and well-being. So how, according to you, can we build on the individual states of employees and help them to effectively come back to work? In your opinion, what are the policies that need to be changed or modified in the post-COVID era? Over to you, Dr. Ankita.
Thank you. Thank you, Sakshi. I think Raghu very beautifully elaborated, and I think a part of my question was already answered by him, that why it is difficult to get back employees in office or back to work that efficiently if at all they are not balanced in terms of physical health or mental. Now, imagine when we are talking about second wave and when things still remain so uncertain and directionless, how a person who is associated with the organization without a clarity would be able to attain a peace of mind, or would be able to define a way for himself or herself. Now, the situation is difficult. Even the organizations do not know where they will land, where they will be after 3 months. Forget about the aspects that we used to talk, that in 2025 we see our organization at this level. We are not sure for 2 months or 3 months now. So can we just simply give up on employees and wait for situation to get better? Probably that's not feasible and that's not practically possible. Can we do everything in the best possible manner and get them to a normal state? Even that is not possible. So the only solution that I could see, or what we are doing in our organization, is we are keeping everything as basic as possible. So we know the pandemic has changed everything around, and probably in the most unexpected and dramatic manner. When there is uncertainty everywhere, we ensure that our employees have answers to these 6 questions. And when I say 6 questions, the first one is why. So if at all there are changes, when we are releasing employees, when we are hiring, when we are doing a hiring freeze, when we are not processing their increment or bonus, proactively we are going back to them and we are telling them that this is the reason, this is the purpose, this is the reason why we are not able to do it. Or if at all we are releasing few employees, we are not able to cross train, this is the reason why we are not able to do so. The second one is what, which is guiding them what role they have to play. So obviously, things are difficult, and when we say this is the reason why we are doing it, obviously they would say fine, justified, but what am I supposed to do? That has to be clearly told to them by the organization, and that's the second move that we have taken. Third one is how, which is telling them how will they get impacted and how will the organization manage. So if at all there is a pay cut, what percentage? If the pay cut is done now, or if there is zero increment next year, will they get double increment, or there will be no increment for next 2 years? So clarity and transparency becomes the most important thing, because they would understand your incapability or your challenges, but that has to be communicated with the right intention at the right time. Fourth thing I would say is, when will this impact most will impact them most, until what time the situation will persist. So we know, we were talking about first wave, and then we were almost back to normal, and then we were badly hit by second wave, and we don't know, a lot of people are talking about third wave. Can we say that, by the end of July or August we will be in a perfect state? Probably not. But if at all we are confused, if at all we don't know where we are headed, at least same has to be communicated to the lot in some sense, in some manner, that they know that probably we do not have a clear road defined, but whatever is feasible and possible, we have defined that, keeping in mind business, but definitely people. Then it's where, which is where we are now, and where will this take us as an organization. We end up doing, or we end up passing statements like, the business is not working, and that's the reason we'll have to do this particular act for our employees. We'll have to release these many, we will promote or retain the critical employees, wherein at some level we keep talking about organization as a family, organization as a whole. So when we are talking about where, we should be clearly able to communicate that where as an organization we stand today and where we will be tomorrow. And the last one is who, as in who will take the ownership. I have seen open houses where we address all our employees saying that we are introducing these policies, this is what we will be doing with your increment, with your bonus, with your promotion, but we don't know what will happen next. I mean, you are the owner of the company, you are the owner of the process. There is a possibility that even you would not know where you would land tomorrow, but because you have the responsibility of those employees, you have to be very clear, you have to own it up, that this is what I'm doing as a leader, and tomorrow if there is a problem, don't worry, I will be there, or we will handle it together. So these are few things. If as in when I talk about these 6 points, I primarily talk about building a connect, and communicating with a purpose, and being there. If these basic things are done, no matter what sector it is, when we are talking about sectors which were highly impacted, or sectors like IT which were able to sustain throughout the tenure, this will still work. And because people have required clarity, they may not be super enthusiastic, but trust me, they'll stand well, and they will be able to play their role as defined by the organization in a much better fashion than the people who do not have any clarity what the business or what the people in it are doing, and the moment they get a better opportunity, they'll just move on. So that's the answer to the first part of the question, Sakshi. The second one that you said, which are the policies those should be changed? I think again, these have to be defined by the leaders on the basis of need. Just because the world is changing, not necessarily everybody has to correct and change, because there is a possibility that few of the organizations are already at the right place. So study your business well, study your system well, and people well, and go in those 4 steps, which is, the first one is identify what has to be changed. Is there a need? If you identify a few, change and stay open for feedback. A lot of times as a senior management, or as a leader, we have a tendency or a habit of communicating, this is what is best for the organization and for you. We fail to take the feedback and, further work on those policies. That is very much required. So feedback has to be taken. Third is repeat the cycle if needed. You have already identified the change, you have studied, you have already changed your system, but if needed, please go back again after you get the feedback from your people. Identify what went wrong, what went right, and strengthen or change or restart the entire process. So this would be the basic flow. I think my co-panelist very beautifully covered that there are few policies those would definitely need to be changed. According to me, I think top 5 to 6 policies would be communication. Obviously, a lot has changed. The virtual has become the new real. So your communication policy, your health and safety policy, reward and recognition, like Raghu just mentioned, data and information security, because now everybody is using system at their place. A lot of people are now into bring your own device mode. So that has to be strengthened. Onboarding and processes linked to statutory processes, because those are changing. Organizations that have considered DNI, because that market has also opened up, and it has opened up in such a vast manner that now you would see 40 to 50% of them are also getting considered when we start our hiring process. So policies have to be made more neutral, that can cover people like gig economy, when we talk about contractors, when we talk about freelancers, or when we talk about people who are on break and they are ready to work for just couple of hours. So these are few, and definitely all your work from home related policy, because earlier it was done keeping in mind that you are working within a defined space where everything is under the control. Now everybody has a different environment and situation. So in a way, all those policies get defined, but the few that I stated would definitely need a very intentional transformation. And I think most of the organizations have done it in the most fantastic manner. So that's my take on the question, Sakshi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ankita. I think very well articulated and beautifully answered in a very short manner. Communication is a key. We should communicate to the employees and to all the stakeholders, which is important. Thank you. And last but not the least, I think I've kept one of the best speakers for the end. I'm pleased to introduce Ambika. Ambika is the Director for Human Capital and Special Initiatives at Antara Senior Living, Max India Group. She has over 15 years of extensive experience partnering with leadership teams to analyze, determine, and implement HR solutions focusing on achieving business results. She is an alumnus of Institute of Technology and Management and Indian School of Business. So, Ankita, you have been leading a team of COVID warriors. So, what, according to you, are the key challenges and learnings from macro level in the organization and the business impacts on it? And the second part of it is what kind of succession planning is being adopted by the organization, and what things have you done, what innovations have you done in your organizations about that? Over to you, Ambika.
Thank you so much, Sakshi. Thank you for a very, elaborate introduction. Very happy to be here within all these panel members. Very interesting conversation. Ankita, you touched few points so beautifully well, which I would have spoken about myself. But I think a lot of challenges today on the healthcare organization was touched upon by Mr. Garg. I think very clearly so. And I'm just going to summarize to our context. We as an organization not only are in the healthcare, but as people we serve are the most fragile and sensitive segment of our population. We take care of seniors. The difference between the first wave and the second wave in terms of just the challenges was the front line wasn't so much of a challenge. I think this time as an organization, and the challenge was for largely the supervisory level. So while the frontline was used to or could understand what exactly needs to be done and could rise up to occasion, the number of unfulfilled demand which was there in the market, and our going ahead in the whole idea of augmenting capacity actually had a whole big pressure on the supervisory there. And that was something which we sort of realized when we only went on to, handling the second wave. So with that, and few other challenges, I largely want to talk about, few of the lessons which we as an organization learned while handling the second wave and seeing what we could do effectively. Yeah, one of course was there's nothing called over planning, honestly, right? All of us as an organization did face COVID first wave. So we knew what to expect. However, most of us were caught unaware in things like resource planning, building for contingency, digital experience for our customer and for our employees. So I think that was point number one, as there is nothing fall, over planning when it comes to these kind of, pandemic sort of situations. The second learning which we had as an organization was this, again, there's nothing called over investing in technology. We hear this too many times: too small, too young, not the priority, let's create the skill, then get the technology in. And I think at least the second wave taught us that if we can't seamlessly shift to digital experience in product creation and customer acquisition and employee experience, some of the organization would be rooted out very quickly. So that bit of learning from a business perspective as well as the employee experience perspective is something which we sort of experience. The third thing was, and that was actually relating to the point of planning too, that we heard a lot about creating resilient organization, creating organization where people feel safe to come, mental health is important, etc. In wave one. I think what some of the organization couldn't do, or most of the organization couldn't do very well, was to break this words down into simple business processes and people's policy. Yeah. So what does it mean to create a resilient organization? Does it mean, and to your point, Sakshi, that could we create another layer of decision makers? Could we create task groups in case a few of our team members, a few of the leadership members are unable to perform the responsibilities? Could we create a contingent task force to take care of those, right? So there's nothing called this breaking down these big words into small steps is again something which we sort of learned very well in this experience. This whole experience also taught us, at least taught our organization, that Plan B and Plan C needs to be as robust and as clear and understood as Plan A. Yeah. We suddenly, from a home healthcare players serving seniors, right, started replacing the unfulfilled need of a hospital. That was never an aspiration. We were not replacing or not in direct competition with hospitals, and was not trying to pick their unfulfilled supply. But we realized that probably we could step in and do that, right? So from fourth learning was that, while this can be costly, while this can be confusing, but episodes such as these are here to stay. And while some of the CEOs did pivot their business strategies to the reality, just the time taken in executing it, explaining it, crafting it was really the opportunity lost. Hence, the importance of Plan B and Plan C. And last was something which I think most of the panelists did speak about, and I sort of personal experience realized that people are able to overcome their personal grief, and they are able to lend themselves to a larger purpose. Mr. Garg spoke about that too, especially in healthcare organizations. So it's important that we give our employees purpose, a meaningful purpose, which is much beyond the goal sheets. And sometimes the outcomes are very, very surprising. So these were the few learnings, Sakshi, I sort of had. And then, of course, that led to us to some of the best practices which I personally saw, of course, and Antara, which we could implement, and few, of course, which we saw and experienced around. Yeah. One was around, and answering your question, Sakshi, on the succession planning, was the whole contingency planning for leadership role, right? So our first wave experience taught us, a few of the leadership team members got impacted and got out of the business for a couple of days. So we were better prepared in the second wave. Most of our leadership member had to nominate another senior person in the team, not in the same department, but in the other function, who can then be inducted and can sort of head the function in terms of, if at all, the need arises. And it was just not heading the function, very clearly saying that who can take financial decisions, who can take functional decisions, who can take process-led decisions, who can take residence decisions, right? So I guess one of the good practice which I saw and sort of really used was a contingency planning at leadership roles. And could be very well replicated. And this is the whole supervisory led experience I could have, would very well replicated at the supervisory and the task force level too. The second learning or the best practice, Sakshi, was pivot soon and fail fast, right? 2 weeks in wave one, we realized that few things have to change. We were a mix of, at that point of time in our juncture, providing creating a facility for our seniors in somewhere in NCR, and we realized that if we are not able to digitally engage with our customers, we may lose this time period of saying, also how do we do, if you don't see the product, you don't buy the product. And we realized that very soon we can change our engagement with our customers digitally. We also realized that few of the traditional channels of acquisitions, client acquisitions, has to be challenged and changed, right? So few of those decisions started to happen, and it did help us in first wave to take the business ahead. And we are very certain by these decisions, few of these decisions or these changes would help us in the second wave too. However, with the same furor, I would like to say that not all the suggestions and not all the changes in the strategy, does work. So it's equally important to fail fast. If a solution on the table doesn't work, it's good to sort of let go of the solution rather than sort of belaboring the point because we've thought of it in first place. The third thing, which I think most of the panelists did speak about, was changing the policies, and Dr. Ankita very well spoke about it. The deal about this whole changes in the communication or changes to how do we engage with our employees is the time is of essence and the words chosen is of essence, right? So even us as an organization, we did have some few quick changes in the policy enabling our front lines. We had special leaves for COVID. We had special covers for COVID, which would, cover also the OPDs. We had isolation packages, created a crack team. Mr. Raghu spoke about how we could help families with hospital oxygens, home cooked food, everything. But this whole aspect really was important because how well and when did we announce it? And I think our employees need to hear it and need to be told that we care and we really do. So the word chosen, that who's communicating it, is the timing right or not? Are the words led by action? All of that is important. And I think this goes a long way in creating bouncing back. We heard that today in the day, bouncing back and creating that safe workforce. And last, really, again,
close.
That's really, last point, Gaurav, and I'll quickly start then. The last point really is not to prioritize business outcomes over team safety and lives, right? We heard the word empathy. Mr. Raghu spoke about that. Empathy and employees are most important things. Most of the boards, most of the investors have heard companies going back to them to ask them recast their plans, recast their projections, revise their guidance. All of that, is a reality, and hence it's important for the businesses to now rethink about their business plans in the wake of current reality, and not to prioritize business and its outcome over, the team safeties and their lives. So these are the few learnings and best practices, Sakshi, I could think about and share with the larger audience today and panel. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Ambika. And I think we have only 5-6 minutes left. And so I have almost 70-80 questions, so I can't ask you in those 5-6 minutes. So what I'll do is I'll mail it to you, and all the participants, we assure you that we will, all the questions that are coming, we will get it answered. But I want to specifically ask 1 or 2 questions, and these are rapid fire. So you have to just give it in maybe one line. So on our panel, we have equal representation of female and male members, but that is not the case that we see in our workforce. And unfortunately, because of this whole first wave, second wave, these pandemics, there has been a lot of increased pressure on our female workforce. So not only they have to work from home, but they have to also work at home. And the way the society works. So any observation or thoughts? Because already we have a very underrepresentation, and our fear is that this will further put pressure and maybe some of them will get out of the workforce. So all Papia, Ankita, and Ambika and Manoj. So
the numbers are actually continuously reducing, and we saw a large number of women leaving the workforce during last year. And it was one of the reasons being that whenever it comes to taking care of home, taking care of kids, the first person to take decision to stay at home is always a woman. So that is the reason that we saw this was happening. Yeah, okay. So even my child is like playing golf and coming in. So the second piece, we also saw that wherever there was an option, like when we have migrating population moved back to villages, and the women lost job because jobs were to be given to the men who were coming back to the villages. The third factor that we saw, that when you had a unorganized sector, men losing their jobs, and they decided to migrate back to villages, even when their wives or their spouses who were working as maids or as tailors or any kind of another employment, they had to leave the employment and move with them. So whatever happens, I think what we are seeing in Indian condition, India is actually one of the worst when it comes to in the world ranking of women working, and we are seeing the constant deterioration into it, because somewhere the mindset and somewhere the dominance that has been given for employment to men. Whenever there is a choice, there is a dominance, and that dominance given to men is impacting. So after 2 3 years, we don't know where we will land, but it is constantly deteriorating.
Good. So, Manoj, your thoughts on this?
So I won't have a global perspective to this, but I can share what happened in our organization. We are healthcare, so we were working from offices, and in HR itself, we have a lot of women team members. Organization-wide, we have close to 30% women workforce. And I asked a couple of them, since we are working from office, how are you managing the home? And quite a lot of them smiling said, "Oh, my husband is at home because he's working from home." So I think this particular pandemic has also helped this, at least in the workforce, which is, I would say, where you are knowledge workers, to bring this parity. Where I'm sure all the panelists would have also washed the utensils and sweep the household. A little bit of balance, right? So I think it's not all gloom and doom. I understand that there is a segment of population which got impacted very badly, but it also had a positive element where the men also realized that there is an opportunity to really take responsibility, and for the first time, a lot of them understood that what does it mean to cook and clean and bring food on the table. So I think the whole appreciation has gone up dramatically. Obviously, there will be a segment of population which will not have that sensitivity. But if I were to really take a positive streak out of it, I think this has been a big leveler.
Good. So a lot of men have got the enlightenment. They have got the Buddha.
Yes.
I think according to Manoj. So Ankita, your views?
Gaurav, I completely agree with what Manoj just said. I think we have seen a lot of improvement. Shouldn't it? It won't be a great statement to say thanks to COVID, but yes, because of COVID, I think a realization has peaked up where organizations have taken that extra move to define policies and processes to get those females back in the system. So earlier, the resistance towards people working from home, because that barrier has been broken, people are now ready that even if a female is at home and she's managing a kid, she can work for 4 hours or 5 hours. There's not just the concept of a full-time employee, but we have full-time employees who can just dedicate half a day. So even in our organization, we have a policy: if a person is able to work only for 3 hours, we proportionately pay them. We find out the parity and we give it to them. If at all they are ready to work for only 3 days a week, we have put them in a project which can accommodate them. So obviously, society at a large, we can blame or we can feel sad about, but in our own piece, how well we are able to adapt, accept, and change for our existing employees or ex-employees, that matters a lot. And I think a lot of organization, at least in my connection, I can say I have seen 70% or more organization moving towards the acceptance of something which was nowhere on a piece of paper earlier. So all good.
Great. Great points. Manish, so how much help you are providing?
In terms of, I mean, DNI agenda, very, very prime for us. And again, as Ankita mentioned and Manoj mentioned, I think very clearly we are supporting our women employees with specific policies, with flexibility of work. But I also kind of agree with what, Papia just said in the SME and, the rural kind of, work economy. So I think a lot more to do, Gaurav, but yes, a lot of appreciation has happened in the last 1.5 years.
Ambika, your thoughts?
I think most of the important points covered, but I guess yes, it's a balanced picture. It's of course what we see on the SME side is still a lot to be done from a policy perspective, from a thinking perspective, from the mindset perspective. But the good move by most of the corporates is, as Manish said, changing the DNI, the whole policy bit, right? A lot of flexibility started to come in. Flexibility was not frowned upon. It was completely understood to not to disturb someone during a lunchtime or in early morning hours where kids would be studying, right? Your parents are expected to be with the child. So I think those kind of changes in the thought by an acceptance by the entire organization just helped our women colleagues to still be in the workforce, to be as productive and thought that they're contributing and not really stepping down or not growing as much. So mix of that, but I guess each of us and all the organization leaders like us have a journey to take to ensure that we can impact policies and processes as much as we can at the nation level and at the organization level.
Great. Raghu, your thoughts?
Okay, my thoughts, since I'd already honed all my culinary as well as homemaking skills in Taiwan when I was living alone, it gave me the opportunity to show off all my skills to my wife because she always thought that I was a very bad cook. So duties were divided at the very beginning, March 2020, when the lockdown was announced in the last week, and duties were divided. So we had absolutely no challenges. We didn't have any friction, and culinary skills were appreciated much more. And physique also fell in place because of all the brooming, sweeping. It played a big role on the physical fitness, I must say, because you were not allowed to go to the gym or go down as well. So yes, I think a lot of skills have been built, upgraded, and appreciated, I would say. That's what has happened for me.
Great. So thanks a lot. I think we really thank all the panelists for your valuable time. We thank all the participants for spending this Saturday evening with us. And we know that there are a lot of questions which are pending. We would later request our panelists to answer all the questions. And we look forward for many such knowledge sessions in future. Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, Sakshi.
Thank you, Sakshi. Thank you, Gaurav, for having us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, entire staff of the India Leadership Forum. Thank you so much for everything. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.